I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. A new year and a new Congress. We'll look at what it means for you. Plus, behind the deadly violence in the Middle East, a report on the underlying tensions between Christians and Muslims.
Between you and me, you are a Christian and I'm a Muslim.
And preserving the Vatican's moments in time. Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Well, when the new Congress is sworn in tomorrow, Republicans will have control of the House, and it's likely that Congressman John Boehner will be elected just the second Catholic Speaker of the House from the GOP. Now, Democrats did manage to hold on to their majority in the Senate despite losing 6 seats. Will this be the start of some greater cooperation between the two parties? Returning from his vacation in Hawaii, President Obama told reporters aboard Air Force One that he is hopeful.
And so my expectation, my hope is that John Boehner and Mitch McConnell will realize that there'll be plenty of time to campaign for 2012 in 2012. And that our job this year is to make sure that we build on recovery. We started making good progress on that during the lame duck, and I expect to build on that progress when I get back.
Obama's words come after Republicans last night unveiled legislation to repeal the recently passed health care reform bill. And health care is just one of many issues likely to be on the table this year. Here to talk about all of this is John Heyer. He's the executive director of the Catholic Citizens Committee. John, welcome back. Great to have you here.
Thank you, and Happy New Year, man.
Thank you very much. You too. And of course, a chilly way to start it off. And, of course, tensions have been high, and the mood in Washington has been a little bit chilly for a long time. Is anything going to change, do you think, when the new Congress comes in?
It'll be very interesting to see. We've already seen many initiatives coming out of Boehner's office, press releases, who he's appointing to different positions. And if that's any indication, it seems on one side, which we're looking at the new rules that Congress is supposed to abide by, that he is looking for some new way to not be so much in control that the House Democrats will have no say. Which has always been the way that it's been. One party rules over the other and controls what legislation comes to the floor. But at the other end of the spectrum, you also see him appointing Congress people such as Issa, Congressman Issa, who is now going to be, quote unquote, the bulldog, going after, ethics review of the entire Obama administration, as well as everything that has happened since the Obama presidential, election.
Right. Well, I mean, and you see a lot of the newly appointed Republican leaders, calling for investigations of this and that, as you say. And meanwhile, the leadership is saying, we're going to be focusing on jobs and on the economy and all of that. But the agenda, as we get started, we see all of those investigations coming up, and now we see the health care vote scheduled for next week on repealing health care reform. What do you see happening? I mean, is this just, and that healthcare reform vote, by the way, I think largely a symbolic thing, because I don't think it really has a chance of going anywhere.
To be honest, if we look at everything that you were just speaking about, if you look at it, I think what it has come down to is really a polarization of ideology. And it's gone back to basics, but at an extreme of what it means to be a Democrat and what it means to be a Republican. Small government on the Republican side, less spending, larger government, more responsibility on the Democrat side. And I think what has been happening, whether it be in the lame duck session, where we saw the Democrats trying to push through quote-unquote liberal agenda, or now the different ideas that we see that the Republicans are going to want to push forward coming out of predominantly the Tea Party movement, you see it's a more and more a split, a polarization in this ideology. The health care bill is symbolic and as well as very practical application of that. Right. And I think what's going to happen is, yes, on one level symbolically, this vote is going to happen in order to say this is why we were elected, this is why there are 90 new Congress people coming into the 112th Congress. But at the same time, we still have a Democrat Senate, we still have a Democratic president. So the Republicans are claiming that they're hoping that what this will do is it'll change people's hearts, kind of unharden their hearts on the Democratic side to go forward with changes. I'm not so sure that that's going to happen. Right. It may either do that or it may just harden their hearts even more, and we may wind up deadlocked.
Could be more of a slow curve than a sharp turn.
Absolutely.
You know. Well, you know, speaking of you know, the turning tide, I mean, how does all of this affect Catholics in particular? Because we've got health care reform, which is a big issue for Catholics. The U.S. Bishops' Conference and Catholics in general have always, you know, supported the idea of health reform, but not this particular legislation that passed because of concerns over abortion coverage in the health care bill, and also with regards to immigration reform. Those are two big things. So how is all of this going to affect Catholics, you think?
Those are actually the two biggest points that I could point out. You know, when it comes to immigration reform, which is at the heart of, you know, the Catholic Church and in our ministry to all people, I don't see any immigration reform going forward the way that we as Catholics may have wanted it to. So that's kind of a negative for us. On the flip side, I do see, even if the Congress cannot stop the legislation or revert the legislation, they may put an end or make it hard to fund the legislation which made healthcare possible, the new healthcare plan, which I believe would help us when it comes to life issues, which were really the concerns of that healthcare.
Right. All right. Well, good. Well, and, you know, I mean, even with Democratic majorities, they couldn't get the DREAM Act passed. So, you know, now it's like, what's going to happen with immigration? Well, John Heyer, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Well, of course, we'll have much more about health care coming up on tomorrow's show. And we have more currents coming up just ahead when we come back. Reports out of Rome say that by year's end, Pope John Paul may be Blessed John Paul. We'll have that and the rest of today's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure. Coming up in just a bit, thousands of pictures get a new lease on life at the Vatican. But first, let's turn to the day's headlines. Well, a deadly attack on a Coptic church in Egypt has made an already tense situation there even more unstable. Hundreds of Christians protested and threw stones at security vehicles after the weekend bombing. They accused the government of not doing enough to protect Christian communities in the majority Muslim country. CNN's Ben Wiedemann has more.
The cleanup at the Qadissine Church in Alexandria is a gruesome job. The church facade is still splattered with dried blood. Volunteers are collecting human remains in white plastic bags. The bomb that killed more than 20 Christians on New Year's has left many worried about their future in this country and wondering if the rest of the world even cares.
Why USA now? To now? Why? The American people don't understand why happened in Egypt.
The shock has yet to wear off.
I ran to the gate. I found a disaster. I found bodies, dead bodies, and wounded people crying, and I cannot sleep that night. Really, I cannot do anything for these people.
Hani Boutros, a church volunteer, insists the attackers must have come from abroad.
I have a lot of people, Muslim people, ask about me, about what's going on, and they're very, very sad. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud I have a lot of Muslim friends.
It's a refrain often heard, but that doesn't always ring true. Often Coptic Christians like to say that relations between Muslims and Christians are good, that they have no problems. But once the camera's off, you get the opposite message. They complain of discrimination by the Muslim majority, of a string of attacks over the last decade that has soured relations between the two communities. Egyptian investigators are pointing the finger at so-called foreign elements. This church was on a list of suggested Christian targets in Egypt, posted on an Islamic militant website in early December. The attack does seem to have inspired a few people to start discussing, in the street, the sensitive topic of sectarian tensions.
Look, you know, we're all of us in the same package now.
Okay,
and
good.
the problem it's not between you and me. You're a Christian, I'm a Muslim.
Kamal Gadallah, a Christian, says the government just isn't doing enough to protect his community.
The police sit down, doesn't do his job. Go around all the church, all the cops sit down. That's all he did. Where is the cops when this guy is coming and stop by there and they kill the people? Where?
Calm returned to Alexandria Monday. Access to the street where the church is located is still restricted, and Egyptian officials insist no effort will be spared to ensure the country's 8 million Christians can mark Orthodox Christmas in peace Friday. But after the New Year's attack, the celebration will be muted at best, behind closed doors, behind a ring of security.
That is CNN's Ben Wiedemann reporting. Well, a report today out of Rome says Pope John Paul II could be beatified later this year. We'll get details on that story now from Rome Reports.
The beatification of John Paul II appears to be quickly approaching. According to the Vatican, during the last weeks of 2010, doctors and theologians from the Congregation for the Causes of Saints gathered in the strictest of secrecy to finally approve the miracle that will take the venerable John Paul II to the altars. It was the instant and unexplainable healing of the French nun Marie-Simone Pierre, who suffered from advanced Parkinson's. The disease forced her to retire from her duties as a nurse in the maternity hospital in Arles, France. In June 2005, after praying to John Paul II for an improvement in her disease, the Parkinson's totally disappeared. Now the miracle just needs to be ratified by the cardinals and bishops of the Congregation for the Causes of Saints, and then signed by Benedict XVI, which is expected to take place this January. Then the eventual beatification of John Paul II will only be a matter of time, and should take place in May or October of this year, which will bring millions of people together in celebration.
Well, meantime, the recently beatified Cardinal John Henry Newman could be one step closer to sainthood himself. The man whose healing led to Newman being raised to the altar says there's been another miracle. Deacon Jack Sullivan, who has been a guest here on Currents, says a young girl was healed from chronic pain while watching Newman's beatification in the fall. The Vatican's confirmation of a second miracle is all that's needed for Newman to become a saint. Well, back here in New York, hundreds of parishioners at a Catholic church on Long Island may have been exposed to the hepatitis A virus while receiving communion Christmas Day. Nassau County health officials say churchgoers from Our Lady of Lourdes in Massapequa should get tested as soon as possible. Reports say a person who handled the communion wafers may have transmitted the disease at 2 masses. Hepatitis A is rarely fatal. It can, though, cause fatigue, stomach pain, and nausea. And finally, a completely different sort of danger at the Shrine of Lourdes in France. Construction crews began working this week to prevent rocks from falling in the area where pilgrims gather for prayer. A peasant girl now known as Saint Bernadette said she had visions of Mary at Lourdes in 1858. More than 6 million people visited the shrine last year. That construction work is expected to continue through the first week of February. Well, stay tuned. There's much more Currents coming up. Just ahead, giving aid to the church in need. We'll hear about some of the places where help is most needed.
Every continent pretty much has an area, particularly places like China and Vietnam. So what the Vatican has been doing is trying to create a connection and also allow for the underground church to come, out of hiding.
Welcome back. The recent bloody attacks on Christians in the Middle East, in Iraq, and now in Egypt have focused attention on the plight of the church, not just there, but all over the world. Yesterday, I spoke with Edward Clancy with the group Aid to the Church in Need USA, who described what Christians are facing in the Middle East. Well, now tonight, in the second part of our conversation, he looks at other hot spots around the globe. Ed, thanks so much for being back here on Currents. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we talked, of course, yesterday about the Middle East, the situation there. Talk to us now a little bit about some other hot spots around the world where Christians come under persecution.
Well, as difficult as it may be to fit in a few seconds, I guess...
try and narrow it down,
Well, every continent pretty much has an area, particularly places like China and Vietnam. In the area of Vietnam, there are over 2,000 seminarians or seminary candidates waiting for approval by the government to enter seminary, and they can wait 20 or 30 years. Wow. And then you have China sort of defying everything that comes out of the Vatican, even though the Vatican has continually tried to work with them to come to some sort of logical plan to allow for the church to grow.
Appointing bishops on the government-backed church there, appointing a bishop just recently and coming under fire for that. The situation in China seems to be a little bit unique in that there is a government-backed, recognized Catholic Church, which is different from the community there that the Vatican sort of recognizes.
Right. Well, to put it, to clear it up, it might be that the Vatican recognizes both faithful groups. Right. But the underground church, as it is called, is the one that is fully in communion with Rome, whereas the patriotic church, which is run by district coordinators in China, that is the one that tends to defy or try to be defiant of Rome. But even within those communities, there are faithful Catholics and there are faithful priests and bishops. So what the Vatican has been doing is trying to create a connection and also allow for the underground church to come, out of hiding.
When you think of Asia, you mentioned China, you mentioned Vietnam as well. North Korea is also another country that comes to mind as far as persecution of religions as well.
Yes, North Korea is, well, it's a very dark area because of the despotism of the leadership, and they don't welcome Christianity very much at all. And even though the Christian faithful there do exist, it's hard for them to worship, and it's hard for them to have what would be a true church because they're always under sanction or under government control in some way.
When we were talking before we went on the air about hotspots around the world for to kind of watch out for, and for people to have on their mind, you mentioned one that is a majority Catholic country, and then and it kind of came as a surprise to me. But then when we talked about the reasoning for it, really not. And that was Haiti, coming up on the first anniversary of the earthquake there. It's really a difficult time for people of any faith, I would imagine.
Yes, oppression of religion comes in many forms. There's oppression by government or by other cultures or other religious groups, but there's also the human situation and the fact that you have Haiti, which suffered a devastating earthquake. There was 200 seminarians displaced in the Port-au-Prince area, and Aid to the Church in Need was able to help them, giving them tents to remain in the seminary, because there was a great fear that these seminarians would just disappear, not that they would not be faithful Catholics, but they would no longer be able to serve the church because they would go back to their homes to take care of whatever's going on, knowing that there's no place for them to stay, no place for them to study.
Yeah. When your place there is completely destroyed, where do you go? You go back home. And of course, the cathedral there also, destroyed in Port-au-Prince, and so just a very devastating situation. You spoke about what your organization does for the church in Haiti and has done for the people of the faith in Haiti. What about around the world? Tell me a little bit about what your organization does to help out Christians where they suffer.
Well, the most important thing for us first is to focus the attention on where the needs are, and that's by doing things like this. But it's also, we help the church grow in places where it is not very easy to grow, in places of persecution and suffering. So our organization was founded by a priest who answered the call of Pope Pius at the end of the Second World War to help the Germans who had been displaced and put into a very harsh situation after World War II in the late 1940s and early 1950s. And since then it went into Eastern Europe and other places around the world. So places like Nigeria or Sudan, or like we mentioned in Asia, in India, where there's violence against Christians, in Orissa and other places. There are a lot of places where the church is suffering. So what we do is we work with the local church, with the local diocese to help strengthen the roots and the foundation of the churches there.
Sure. All right. Well, Ed Clancy with Aid to the Church in Need, we thank you so much for your time. We'll link up folks to how they can get more information about the organization, how they can help. And of course, there's a lot of need, as we've been discussing. So thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time.
You're very welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And I have posted more about Aid to the Church in Need over on our blog. Just visit currentsny.net and click on Riding the Wave. In the meantime, though, stay where you are. There's much more Currents coming up. When we return, it's one way to make the church's archives picture perfect. Finally tonight, the Vatican is known for collecting some of the world's priceless treasures, but not all of them are painted on canvas or sculpted of marble. It turns out the Vatican is also home to some valuable, irreplaceable photographs, and time is taking a toll on them. But as we hear now from Rome Reports, a new effort is underway to preserve these important records and help give generations to come a clearer picture of the way we were.
Each photograph captures a moment in time, a reminder of its uniqueness. Father Giuseppe Colombara understands this well. He's director of the photographic services of L'Osservatore Romano. Being aware of the great heritage that the Vatican newspaper has on hand, he decided to make the jump into new technologies and to digitize its more than 7 million negatives. These millions of snapshots from public and private moments of the popes are at risk of being lost if damaged. These photos have a great importance, such as this one of Pius XII before the damage from the bombing of the Roman district of San Lorenzo in 1943. Or this photo when Pope John Paul II met with Ali Agca, the Turkish terrorist who tried to assassinate him in 1981.
In realtà l'idea.
Some years ago, we confirmed some damage was done to the photographs. We then found the need to overcome these difficulties and save these images. The problem was financing the project.
Now, however, money is not a problem thanks to the support of two sponsors who donated 2 million euros. The process will take about 5 years, which includes the digitization of photographs as well as the renovation of some rooms to create a microclimate that will protect the paper photos from its main enemies of light, bacteria, and the passage of time.
La luce impropria.
The direct light is also one of the most damaging agents of photographs, even though the film has already been developed, because the negative is a very sensitive type of support. It's the same as a gelatin-coated film. When you vary some of these atmospheric components, as well as bacteria and acids from hand contact, it makes it more difficult in this process of care.
This is the most advanced technology used in the care of this photographic heritage, documenting the Church's history, humanity, and the Vatican.
You know, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, some of those images definitely worth much more than that. Well, that is it for tonight. Now, coming up tomorrow, the looming battle over health care reform. Leaders in the new Congress have declared that will be their #1 priority, and we'll hear what it may mean for you. In the meantime, though, remember we're always online at currentsny.net. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook as well. And also, if you have a story idea, drop us a line. Our email address is dropusaline@currentsny.net. Until next time, I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great night.